Julian Pierce, CEO of Axiom Tech, sits shocked in airport security, his $5,000 suit rumpled, phone buzzing with viral videos of his forcible removal from first class. The headline reads, "Airline crew fired, stock plummets 30%. 5 hours earlier, he'd been just another passenger." Before we dive into this shocking story, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling. You won't believe how quickly justice came for this successful black CEO who was just trying to take his rightful seat. The morning had started like any other for Julian Pierce. At 45, the self-made tech CEO of Axiom Tech had developed a routine that maximized efficiency. His alarm chimed at 4:30 a.m., giving him time for a 5-mile run through his upscale New Jersey neighborhood before the sun rose. Running cleared his mind, especially today when so much was at stake. Back at his modernist home overlooking the Hudson River, Julian showered and dressed meticulously in a tailored charcoal Armani suit, crisp white shirt and his signature red tie, a pop of color that matched the Axiom logo. As he adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a gift to himself when Axiom first broke $100 million in revenue, he surveyed his reflection. Success looked good on him, even with the silver threading through his short-cropped hair at the temples. "You've come a long way from Detroit," he murmured to himself. Indeed he had. Growing up in one of Detroit's toughest neighborhoods, Julian had been that rare combination of street smart and book smart. His mother Elaine, a hospital administrator who worked double shifts, had sacrificed everything to move them to a safer area with better schools. Julian had repaid her faith by winning a scholarship to MIT, where he'd graduated top of his class in computer science despite being one of only 12 black students in his program. The tech industry hadn't been kind to him initially. Despite his credentials, Julian had watched white classmates with lower GPAs get snapped up by Silicon Valley while his resume generated tepid responses. His first job had been at a struggling startup where the founder had hired him as a diversity initiative. Julian had turned that backhanded opportunity into gold, rewriting their core product's code so efficiently that the company was acquired 12 months later for $20 million. By 35, after helping build 3 more successful companies, Julian had founded Axiom Tech. Now, 10 years later, Axiom was valued at $450 million, with Julian still retaining 51% ownership. As he sipped his black coffee in his kitchen, his phone buzzed. It was Kendall, his executive assistant. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce. Just confirming your 2 p.m. meeting with Horizon Global in San Francisco. Their corporate car will pick you up at SFO. Victoria Reynolds has extended the meeting to include dinner." "Perfect, Kendall. Everything ready for the presentation?" "Yes, sir. All materials are loaded on your secure drive and I've printed backup copies in your briefcase. This merger is going to make history." Julian allowed himself a rare smile. Yes, it would. If today's meeting went well, Axiom would acquire Horizon Global in a deal worth $3 billion, making Axiom the largest black-owned technology company in America. Currently, Julian was one of only 4 black CEOs in the Fortune 500. This deal would not only cement his legacy but create opportunities for hundreds of minority professionals in an industry that still struggled with diversity. "The car will be there in 20 minutes to take you to Newark," Kendall added. "Thanks. Keep an eye on things while I'm flying. I'll check in when I land." After ending the call, Julian dialed his mother. At 73, Elaine Pierce still lived in the modest home Julian had bought her in a safe Detroit suburb when Axiom first became profitable. "Morning, baby," she answered on the first ring, despite the early hour. Old habits died hard for a woman who'd worked hospital shifts for 40 years. "Big day, Mom," Julian said, his voice softening as it always did with her. "I've been praying for you. Your father would be so proud." Julian swallowed hard. His father, a factory worker, had died of heart failure when Julian was 16, worked to death, his mother always said, by a system that extracted labor from black bodies until nothing remained. I wish he could see this. Everything we've built. He sees, baby. And remember what I always told you growing up. I know, Mom. They can take your money, they can take your things, but they can never take your dignity unless you give it away. That's right. Now go show them what a Pierce can do. The call ended just as Julian's driver Timothy arrived. As they drove to Newark Liberty International Airport, Julian reviewed his presentation one more time. The merger would allow Axiom's cybersecurity solutions to integrate with Horizon's cloud infrastructure, creating an end-to-end platform that would rival the biggest players in the industry. At the airport, Julian bypassed the main check-in thanks to his platinum status, heading straight to the premium lane. The airline representative brightened when she saw his name. Mr. Pierce. It's an honor to have you flying with us today. I've upgraded you to our best first-class seat, 2A. It's right by the window with extra legroom. Thank you, Julian said, accepting his boarding pass with a smile. As he moved toward security, a young black man working at the shoeshine stand recognized him. Mr. Pierce. Julian Pierce. The young man, whose name tag read DeAndre, looked about 20. Julian paused. He always made time for young people, especially those who looked like him. That's me. Sir, your speech at Howard University last year changed my life. I'm saving up for community college, studying coding at night. Julian's face warmed with genuine pleasure. Keep at it. What's your name? DeAndre Washington, sir. Julian pulled out his business card and scribbled on the back. Email this address when you complete your first coding certification. We offer paid internships. DeAndre's eyes widened. For real. For real. Hard work should be rewarded. As Julian continued toward the security checkpoint, he felt that familiar mix of pride and responsibility. His success wasn't just his own, it created a wake that could lift others if he steered it right. Security was a breeze with his TSA pre-check status, and soon Julian was settling into the first-class lounge, reviewing his notes one final time before boarding. When his flight was called, he was among the first to board, nodding politely to the flight attendants who greeted him at the door of the Boeing 787. Welcome aboard, Mr. Pierce, said the lead flight attendant, a blonde woman whose name tag read Vanessa. Her smile seemed genuine as she guided him to his seat in the spacious first-class cabin. Seat 2A was perfect, a window seat with no one next to him yet, offering both privacy and a view. Julian stowed his briefcase, containing the critical merger documents, in the overhead compartment, keeping only his phone and a small notebook at his seat. As other first-class passengers boarded, Julian observed them with the practiced eye of someone who had fought to belong in exclusive spaces. Mostly older white men in business attire, a few white women in elegant casual wear, and one Asian man who gave Julian a subtle nod of recognition, the silent acknowledgement shared between minorities in predominantly white spaces. Julian returned the nod, then turned to gaze out the window. In the reflection, he could see his own face superimposed over the airport tarmac, a black man in first class, still something of a rarity. But not for long, he thought. Not if he had anything to do with it. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard the non-stop service to San Francisco. The merger meeting was just hours away. Julian closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He had no idea that in less than 30 minutes, his world would be turned upside down. The boarding process continued smoothly as Julian reviewed his presentation notes. Occasionally, he glanced up to observe his fellow first-class passengers settling in. The flight attendant, Vanessa, had been attentive, already offering him a pre-departure glass of champagne, which he politely declined in favor of water. Just let me know if you need anything else, Mr. Pierce, she said with a professional smile that reached her eyes. Julian had noticed over the years how some service workers' demeanors changed when they realized who he was, either becoming overly deferential or subtly colder. Vanessa seemed genuinely courteous, which he appreciated. That changed when the final first-class passenger boarded. Wade Thornton was a man who commanded attention without trying, or perhaps because he tried too hard. In his mid-50s with silver-streaked blonde hair and an expensive tan that contrasted with his ice-blue eyes, he wore a navy power suit that probably cost as much as Julian's. A heavy gold watch glinted on his wrist as he handed his suit jacket to Vanessa without looking at her. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thornton," Vanessa said, her voice taking on a different tone, more reverent, Julian noticed. Wade nodded absently, his gaze sweeping the first-class cabin until it landed on Julian. Something flickered across his face, surprise, followed by what Julian had seen countless times before, displeasure at finding a black man in a space Wade considered his domain. Julian returned to his notes, ignoring the look. He'd developed a thick skin over decades of being the only one in rooms full of white executives. "Excuse me," Wade's voice came sharply from the aisle. "I believe you're in my seat." Julian looked up calmly. "I don't think so. I'm in 2A. That's my seat. I always have 2A on this flight. Every Tuesday." Wade's tone suggested this fact should be obvious to everyone. Julian reached for his boarding pass. "My boarding pass says 2A. Wade's face tightened. "There's been a mistake. I'm Executive Platinum and I specifically reserved this seat. I've had it for the past 17 consecutive flights." By now, other first-class passengers were watching the interaction with uncomfortable interest. Julian could feel their stares as he maintained his composure. "I understand, but I was assigned this seat at check-in. Perhaps customer service can sort this out." Julian's voice remained even, though his pulse quickened slightly, not from intimidation, but from the familiar tension of navigating a challenge to his belonging. "Vanessa," Wade called out, not taking his eyes off Julian. "There seems to be a seating issue." Vanessa approached, her previously warm demeanor now uncertain as she glanced between the two men. "What seems to be the problem?" "This gentleman is in my seat," Wade stated flatly. "I always sit in 2A. It should be noted in my profile." "Sir," Vanessa addressed Julian, not Wade, which Julian noted with interest. "May I see your boarding pass?" Julian handed it over. "As you can see, I was assigned 2A. Vanessa examined it and nodded. "This is correct, Mr. Pierce. You are in your assigned seat." Wade's face darkened. "This is unacceptable. Check my customer profile. I've had standing reservations for this seat for over a year." "Let me get my supervisor," Vanessa said, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. She returned moments later with another flight attendant whose name tag read, Brittany, and identified her as the purser. Brittany, a redhead with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, assessed the situation quickly. "What seems to be the issue?" Before Vanessa could explain, Wade jumped in. "I'm Executive Platinum, weekly flyer, and my profile specifically reserves seat 2A on every Tuesday flight to San Francisco. Yet I've been reassigned without notification." Julian noticed how Wade didn't mention him directly, speaking as if the seat were empty rather than occupied by another paying customer. Brittany turned to Julian, her expression already dismissive. "Sir, it appears there's been a mix-up. Mr. Thornton is one of our most valued customers with specific seating arrangements. I have a confirmed assignment for this seat," Julian responded calmly, gesturing to the boarding pass Vanessa still held. Brittany barely glanced at it. "These computer errors happen sometimes. I'm sure we can find you a comfortable seat elsewhere in first class." Julian raised an eyebrow, maintaining his composure though irritation flickered through him. "My boarding pass isn't a computer error. I was assigned this seat at check-in." Around them, the other first-class passengers had fallen into uncomfortable silence. Julian noticed none would meet his eye. They stared at their phones or out windows, pretending not to witness the confrontation. It was a familiar phenomenon, the collective looking away when discrimination unfolded in real time. "Sir," Brittany's voice took on an edge, "for the sake of an on-time departure, would you be willing to take seat 4C? It's still in first class." Julian noticed how Mr. Pierce had become Sir while Wade remained Mr. Thornton. These subtle shifts in respect were familiar terrain for him. "I'd prefer to stay in my assigned seat," Julian said firmly. "If there's a booking issue, perhaps Mr. Thornton would be willing to take the alternative seat you're offering." Wade scoffed. "I've had the same seat for 17 consecutive flights. It's in my customer profile. This is about respecting loyal customers." Brittany turned back to Julian, her smile now completely gone. "Sir, I'm trying to find a reasonable solution here. Mr. Thornton has status that entitles him to certain accommodations." The implication hung in the air. Julian felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, the controlled anger he'd learned to manage since childhood. As a successful black man, he knew the double standard all too well. Expressing even mild frustration would instantly transform him into the angry black man stereotype, while Wade's visible agitation was simply seen as justifiable frustration. "I have status as well," Julian replied evenly. "And a confirmed seat assignment. I'd like to see the manifest, please." Brittany's eyes narrowed slightly. "The manifest won't change the situation. We need to prepare for departure, and you're currently delaying the flight." Julian noticed how quickly the narrative had shifted. Now he, not Wade, was causing the problem. It was a familiar sleight of hand he'd encountered throughout his career. "I'm not delaying anything. I'm sitting in my assigned seat with my seatbelt fastened," Julian pointed out. "It's not reasonable to ask me to move when I have a confirmed assignment." Wade's patience visibly snapped. "This is ridiculous. I've been flying this route every Tuesday for years. Everyone knows this is my seat." "Mr. Thornton, please," Vanessa interjected, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Let me check if we can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Wade replied sharply. "Either your airline honors its commitments to loyal customers, or it doesn't." Brittany straightened her shoulders and lowered her voice. "Sir," she addressed Julian again, "I'm going to have to insist you move to accommodate Mr. Thornton. If you refuse, I'll need to call security." The threat hung in the air. Julian felt the eyes of everyone in first class on him now, their discomfort palpable. He had two choices: surrender his rightful seat to appease the situation, or stand his ground and risk escalation. In his 20-year career, Julian had learned when to pick his battles. But he'd also learned that some principles couldn't be compromised. This wasn't about a seat anymore, it was about dignity. "I understand you have a difficult situation to manage," Julian said calmly, "but I won't be moving from my assigned seat. If there's a booking issue, that's for the airline to resolve without displacing passengers who are already seated according to their confirmed assignments." Brittany's expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." She pulled out her phone and stepped away to make a call. Wade stood in the aisle, arms crossed, a satisfied expression settling on his face. Around them, the other passengers squirmed uncomfortably in the tense atmosphere, but still, no one spoke up. Julian took a deep breath and pulled out his own phone, opening his email to forward his confirmed seat assignment to his legal team, just in case. He had a feeling he might need documentation of what was unfolding. The confrontation had crossed a point of no return, and Julian knew from experience that what happened next would reveal much about America's progress, or lack thereof, when it came to treating all its citizens with equal respect regardless of the color of their skin. "Sir, security has been called. This is your last opportunity to comply voluntarily." Brittany's words hung in the tense air of the first-class cabin. Julian maintained his composure, though his heart hammered against his ribs. 20 years of corporate America had taught him that showing emotion, especially as a black man, would only be used against him. I understand, Julian replied evenly, but I'm still waiting to see documentation showing why I should be removed from my assigned seat. Wade Thornton made a show of checking his watch. Some of us have important meetings to get to. The irony wasn't lost on Julian. He too had an important meeting, one that would create hundreds of jobs and opportunities for minorities in tech. But that fact remained invisible to those making assumptions about him. Within minutes, 2 security officers appeared at the entrance to first class. The first, a tall white man with a crew cut whose name badge read, Bryant, scanned the cabin with cold efficiency. Behind him stood a shorter black officer whose badge identified him as Maxwell. Julian noticed Maxwell's eyes widen slightly in recognition before his expression became professionally neutral again. It was a brief moment that spoke volumes. Maxwell knew exactly who Julian was but wouldn't acknowledge it. "What's the situation?" Bryant asked Brittany. "This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions," she said, gesturing toward Julian while avoiding eye contact. "We've asked him repeatedly to change seats to resolve a booking issue." "Sir," Bryant addressed Julian directly, "I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. May I ask what policy I'm violating by sitting in my assigned seat?" Julian maintained steady eye contact with the officer, keeping his hands visible on the armrests, another survival tactic black men learned early. "The captain has final authority over all seating arrangements," Bryant recited mechanically. "Failure to comply with crew instructions is a federal offense." From the cockpit doorway, a white man in his 60s with captain's stripes appeared. "What's the delay?" he asked Brittany. "Seating issue, Captain Gregory." "Being handled now," she replied. The captain glanced at Julian, then addressed the cabin. "Folks, we apologize for the delay. We have an unruly passenger situation that's being resolved. We'll have you on your way shortly." Unruly passenger. The label stung Julian like a physical blow. He'd said nothing confrontational, raised his voice to no one, yet was being characterized as disruptive simply for not surrendering his rightful place. Have you ever been labeled as difficult just for standing your ground? Comment number 1 if you faced similar unfair treatment while traveling. If you believe Julian should have just moved seats to avoid trouble, comment number 2. This story only gets more intense from here, so hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how Julian responds to this blatant injustice. "Sir, stand up please." Bryant's tone made it clear this was not a request. Julian looked around the cabin one last time, hoping someone, anyone, might speak up. The Asian businessman from earlier looked down at his laptop. An older white woman pretended to be absorbed in her magazine. No one would meet his eyes. "I'll comply, but I want it noted that I'm being removed without cause from a seat I was assigned," Julian said clearly, making sure his words carried throughout the cabin. "Stand up now," Bryant repeated, more forcefully. Julian rose slowly, his 6'2" frame unfolding with dignity. He reached for his phone and small notebook. "Your carry-on items will be brought to you," Bryant said, gesturing toward the exit. "My briefcase has confidential business documents. I need to take it with me," Julian explained, pointing to the overhead bin. "We don't have time for that," Bryant said, placing a hand on Julian's upper arm. The touch triggered something primal in Julian, the violation of his personal space, the assumption that his body could be controlled by others. He stiffened but didn't pull away, knowing that any resistance would be interpreted as aggression. Maxwell, the black security officer, stepped forward. "I'll get his briefcase," he said quietly, reaching up to retrieve it. As Maxwell handed the briefcase to Julian, their eyes met briefly. Maxwell's held an apology, perhaps even shame. Julian's reflected understanding. Both men knew the unwritten rules of this game all too well. But as Julian took the briefcase, Bryant jostled his arm, causing the lock to spring open. Papers spilled across the aisle, confidential merger documents, financial projections, strategy plans, scattered at the feet of first-class passengers. "My documents." Julian instinctively bent to gather them. Leave them, Bryant ordered, tightening his grip on Julian's arm. The diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe watch on Julian's wrist, a gift to himself when Axiom went public, scraped painfully against the handrest, leaving a visible scratch on its face. As Julian was forcibly guided toward the exit, he noticed a young white woman in row 5 surreptitiously recording the incident on her phone. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a small nod. Wade Thornton was already settling into seat 2A, removing Julian's water glass and placing it on the flight attendant's tray with a look of distaste. The walk through the plane became Julian's personal Via Dolorosa. Every eye was on him, the successful black man being marched out like a criminal. In economy, where the demographics were more diverse, he saw expressions of recognition, shock, and anger on the faces of black passengers who clearly knew who he was. "Isn't that Julian Pierce?" he heard someone whisper. "The Axiom guy? Why are they removing him?" By the time they reached the jet bridge, Julian's pristine Armani suit was rumpled, his dignity assaulted, his merger documents haphazardly stuffed back into his briefcase by Maxwell, who had gathered them while Bryant maintained his grip on Julian's arm. At the gate, a flustered airline supervisor waited. "Mr. Pierce, we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience," she began, clearly having been informed of his identity after the fact. "Inconvenience?" Julian finally allowed his voice to rise slightly. "I was forcibly removed from my assigned seat to accommodate another passenger, publicly humiliated, and physically handled. That's not an inconvenience, that's discrimination." The supervisor blanched. "Sir, I assure you that race had nothing to do with." "I didn't mention race," Julian cut in sharply. "Interesting that you went there immediately." Behind him, he could hear the aircraft door closing. Through the window, he watched as flight attendant Brittany helped Wade get comfortable in his seat, offering him a fresh glass of champagne with a smile that hadn't been extended to Julian. "Your personal items," the gate agent said, handing Julian a plastic bag containing his phone charger and reading glasses that had been in the seatback pocket. Julian took the bag, suddenly feeling the weight of what had happened. Despite his wealth, his success, his education, none of it had protected him from being seen as less deserving than a white man who wanted his seat. As the plane pushed back from the gate without him, Julian stood alone, watching his chance to make history with the Horizon merger taxiing away. The plastic bag of his belongings dangled from his fingers like a symbol of how quickly dignity could be reduced to scraps. For the first time since the confrontation began, Julian allowed himself to feel the full force of his anger. Not just for himself, but for every black person who had ever been told, explicitly or implicitly, that their rightful place could be taken from them at any moment. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What would you do if you were in Julian's position? Have you ever witnessed someone being discriminated against and felt powerless to help? Type number 1 if you believe most people would have spoken up in this situation. Type number 2 if you think fear of getting involved keeps most people silent. Let's continue this story and see how Julian turns this humiliation into a powerful movement for change. Julian Pierce sat alone in the airport's premium lounge, a space he'd visited countless times yet now felt foreign. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, suit wrinkled from the security officer's handling. The scratch on his watch caught the light, a physical reminder of the morning's events. The lounge attendant had recognized him immediately. "Mr. Pierce. We heard what happened. Please, anything you need is on us today." Julian had nodded silently, accepting a coffee he didn't touch. What he needed couldn't be provided by the airline's hasty attempts at damage control. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since he'd been escorted off the plane. The first call came from Lawrence Washington, his VP of Operations, wondering why Julian's flight tracking app showed the plane departing without him. "Julian? What's going on? The San Francisco team is waiting on confirmation of your arrival time." Julian cleared his throat, fighting to keep his voice steady. "There was an incident. I was removed from the flight." "Removed? What are you talking about?" As Julian recounted the events, Lawrence's shocked expletives punctuated the story. At 52, Lawrence had been in corporate America even longer than Julian and had experienced his share of discrimination. "This is outrageous. Did anyone record it?" "A passenger was filming." "I don't know if, check Twitter," Lawrence interrupted. "Now." Julian pulled up the app and froze. Hashtag Justice for Julian was already trending, with over 20,000 tweets in the past hour. The video, taken by the young woman in row 5, Olivia Chen according to her profile, had been viewed over 100,000 times and was climbing rapidly. The footage was damning. It clearly showed Julian calmly stating he was in his assigned seat, Brittany's dismissive attitude, and Bryant's unnecessarily rough handling. Most tellingly, it captured Wade Thornton's smug expression as he settled into the disputed seat while Julian was marched away. "My God," Julian whispered. "The internet is on fire," Lawrence confirmed. "Media outlets are picking it up. What do you want us to do?" Julian's strategic mind clicked into gear. "Reschedule with Horizon. See if Victoria can do a video call instead, or push to tomorrow. I need to book another flight." "Already on it. Do you want me to issue a statement?" Julian considered this carefully. "No. Not yet. I need to think about how we respond." As he ended the call, an airline representative approached his table. Her name badge identified her as Helen, Customer Relations Manager. "Mr. Pierce," she began, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy, "on behalf of the airline, I want to extend our sincere apologies for the misunderstanding this morning." "Misunderstanding?" Julian repeated, his tone dangerously quiet. Helen seemed not to notice the warning in his voice. "As a gesture of goodwill, I'm authorized to offer you a $300 travel voucher and rebooking on our next flight to San Francisco." Julian stared at her, momentarily speechless. They had publicly humiliated one of the country's most successful black executives, potentially jeopardized a billion-dollar merger, and thought $300 would make it disappear. "Ms. Helen," he said finally, "do you know what my hourly consulting rate is?" She blinked, caught off guard. "No, sir. $25,000. That's what companies pay for an hour of my expertise. I've already lost 3 hours of my time due to your airline's actions, not counting the meeting I'm missing. And you're offering me a $300 voucher?" Helen's professional smile faltered. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but, no, you don't," Julian cut in, his composure finally cracking. "You don't understand what it's like to be treated as less than human because of your skin color. You don't understand what it's like to achieve everything society tells you to achieve, only to be reminded that to some people, you'll always be someone who doesn't belong in first class." A few heads turned in the lounge, but Julian no longer cared who heard him. "Your airline didn't have a misunderstanding. Your staff made assumptions based on race, violated your own policies, used security to enforce those violations, and now you're trying to buy my silence with pocket change." Helen's face had gone pale. "Sir, I assure you race had nothing to do with, save it," Julian said, rising to his feet. "Your $300 voucher is an insult. You can tell your superiors that Julian Pierce won't be bought off or silenced." As Helen retreated, a woman approached from a nearby table. She was Asian American, around 40, dressed in a sharp suit that marked her as a fellow professional. "Mr. Pierce? I'm Amanda Chen, civil rights attorney. I witnessed what happened at the gate." She extended her hand and a business card. "What they did was textbook discrimination, and I'd be happy to discuss your options." Julian accepted her card, noting the prestigious law firm name embossed on heavy stock. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. I've been following your career for years," she continued. "What you've built at Axiom is remarkable. Don't let them sweep this under the rug." As Amanda returned to her table, Julian's phone rang again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Pierce? This is Alyssa Martinez from CNN. We'd like to get your statement about the incident on Flight 1372 this morning. Julian ended the call without answering. Within seconds, another came in, MSNBC. Then Fox Business. The story was exploding. His personal phone rang next. It was his mother. Julian, Elaine Pierce's voice was tight with controlled fury. I just saw the video. Are you alright? Despite everything, Julian smiled slightly. Even at 45, his mother's first concern was always his well-being. I'm fine, Mom. No, you're not, she said firmly. I raised you to know when you're being mistreated. But I also raised you to remember who you are. I know, Mom. Dignity always. That's right. They can take your seat, but they can't take your dignity unless you let them. What are you going to do about this? It was the same question she'd asked when he'd been passed over for promotions, when investors had questioned his capabilities, when neighbors had called the police because a black man was entering his own luxury building. I'm going to fight, Julian said, his resolve hardening. Not just for me. That's my son, Elaine replied. Call me when you land in San Francisco. Julian ended the call and opened his laptop. He booked a first-class ticket on a competing airline, departing in 2 hours. Then he opened his email and forwarded the viral video to Axiom's legal team with a simple message: prepare for battle. As he gathered his belongings, Julian caught sight of his reflection in the lounge's glass wall. His father had always told him that a man's true character was revealed not by his successes but by how he responded to injustice. Today, Julian had been reminded that even with all his achievements, he still lived in a world where his humanity could be questioned based on the color of his skin. But he'd also been reminded of something else, that he had the power and platform to fight back. Not just for himself, but for every person who'd ever been made to feel they didn't belong. As he walked toward the gate for his new flight, Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Lawrence. Horizon CEO Victoria just called. She saw the video. Says she's outraged and fully supports whatever action you want to take. Meeting rescheduled for tomorrow. She said, and I quote, tell Julian we stand with him. For the first time since the ordeal began, Julian felt a spark of hope. Perhaps some good could come from this humiliation after all. Julian's competing airline flight landed at San Francisco International Airport 3 hours behind his original schedule. Despite the delay, he'd used the time productively, working on his presentation while monitoring the growing social media firestorm. By the time he disembarked, #JusticeForJulian had amassed over 500,000 tweets, and the video of his removal had been viewed more than 3 million times. A sleek black Tesla with Horizon Global's logo waited for him at the curb. The driver, recognizing him immediately, took his briefcase with a respectful nod. Ms. Reynolds asked me to bring you directly to her office, sir. She's postponed all other meetings to see you. Julian checked his reflection in the car's window before getting in. He'd managed to freshen up on the flight, his suit now less rumpled, his composure fully restored. Only the scratch on his watch remained as physical evidence of the morning's events. The drive to Horizon's headquarters in Silicon Valley took 40 minutes, during which Julian received a call from his PR director, Sophia Williams. Julian, this is unprecedented. Every major news outlet is covering the story. The airline stock has dropped 8% since market open, and it's still falling. What's their official response? Julian asked. Standard corporate damage control. They've issued a statement saying they're investigating the incident and that they value all customers. Nothing substantial. And the public reaction? Overwhelmingly in your favor. Your personal approval rating has shot up 30 points. People are canceling their bookings with the airline and posting the screenshots online. Several celebrities have tweeted support for you. Julian nodded, though Sophia couldn't see him. What about Wade Thornton? Been identified yet? Twitter detectives found him within an hour. He's CFO at Pinnacle Investments. Their social media is being flooded with complaints. Keep monitoring. No official statement from us yet. I want to speak with Horizon first. As the Tesla pulled up to Horizon Global's impressive glass headquarters, Julian noticed several employees watching his arrival through the windows, some holding up phones to take pictures. News of his ordeal had clearly reached everyone. Victoria Reynolds, Horizon's CEO, was waiting in the lobby. At 58, she was a rarity in Silicon Valley, a woman who had built her cloud computing company from scratch and fended off multiple buyout attempts to maintain control. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in her trademark severe bun, but her expression was uncharacteristically warm as she approached Julian. "Julian," she said, grasping his hand firmly. "I'm appalled by what happened to you this morning." "Thank you for rescheduling, Victoria." "Not at all. Come upstairs. My team is waiting." In Horizon's executive boardroom, 8 people rose as Julian entered, the company's top executives and their legal counsel. Unlike his previous visits, where handshakes had been perfunctory and the atmosphere competitive, today there was a palpable sense of solidarity. "Before we discuss the merger," Victoria began once they were seated, "I want to make Horizon's position clear. What happened to you today was inexcusable, and we stand with you completely." Julian nodded, touched by the straightforward support. "I appreciate that. As a woman in tech, I've faced my share of discrimination," Victoria continued. "Nothing like what you experienced today, but enough to understand that these aren't isolated incidents, they're symptoms of systemic problems." Marcus Chen, Horizon's chief legal officer, spoke up. "Julian, off the record, are you planning legal action against the airline?" "I'm considering all options," Julian replied carefully. "Whatever you decide, Horizon supports you," Victoria stated firmly. "Now, shall we discuss our future partnership? I believe it's more important than ever." For the next 2 hours, they reviewed the merger details. Despite the morning's chaos, Julian's presentation was flawless. The terms were finalized. Axiom would acquire Horizon for $3 billion, creating the largest black-owned technology company in America and the 5th largest cybersecurity firm globally. As the meeting concluded, Victoria pulled Julian aside. "The news about the airline is getting worse by the hour. Have you seen?" She handed him her tablet, open to a financial news site. The headline read, "Airline stock plummets as #Boycott Airways trends worldwide." The article detailed how the airline stock had now dropped 17%, wiping billions off its market valuation as the boycott gained momentum. Celebrities from Beyoncé to George Clooney had shared the video, condemning the airline and pledging never to fly with them again. "This is moving faster than I anticipated," Julian admitted. "Corporate America is finally learning that discrimination has a price tag," Victoria said. "Speaking of which, I've instructed our travel department to cancel all contracts with that airline. Horizon spends about $12 million annually on corporate travel, they'll feel it." Julian's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Kendall, his assistant. "Mr. Pierce, the airline CEO's office has called 3 times in the past hour. He's eager to speak with you personally." Julian smiled grimly. "I bet he is. Also, their chief diversity officer sent over a settlement offer. $2 million and a public apology, in exchange for your signature on a confidentiality agreement." Julian's jaw tightened. "Tell them I'm not interested in confidential settlements. This isn't about money." "Understood, sir. One more thing, there's been a leak. Someone at the airline shared internal communications about the incident. Well, you should see for yourself." Within minutes, the documents appeared in Julian's email. They contained text messages between Brittany, the head flight attendant, and Captain Gregory before takeoff, "Got a situation in 2A. Black packs refusing to move for Thornton. Again. These people always make a scene. Security coming. Should be quick. Julian showed the messages to Victoria, whose expression hardened. This removes all doubt. They need to be held accountable. By the time Julian left Horizon's offices, news networks were running wall-to-wall coverage of the incident. A financial analyst on CNBC was discussing the airline's tanking stock price. This could be the most expensive seat reassignment in aviation history. We're talking potentially hundreds of millions in market value lost. CNN had identified Wade Thornton, showing his corporate headshot alongside footage of him taking Julian's seat. A statement from Pinnacle Investments scrolled across the bottom of the screen: "We are investigating the incident involving our CFO. Pinnacle is committed to diversity and inclusion, and we take these matters seriously." Julian's phone rang again, Lawrence with an update from New York. "You won't believe this. 3 competing airlines have reached out offering you lifetime premium status. Delta's CEO personally called to say they'd like you to be the face of their new Respect Matters campaign." "Not interested in becoming a corporate mascot," Julian replied. "Figured you'd say that." "Oh, and Wade Thornton?" "Pinnacle just announced he's taking up leave of absence pending investigation. The internet found complaints from 2 flight attendants of color who said he'd made racist remarks on previous flights." As Julian's driver navigated toward his San Francisco hotel, a new email arrived from Amanda Chen, the civil rights attorney he'd met at the airport. "Mr. Pierce, after witnessing what happened today and reviewing the leaked communications, I'm more convinced than ever that you have a landmark discrimination case. This could set important precedent for how airlines, and corporations generally, handle racial bias. I've taken the liberty of drafting a preliminary brief. Would you be interested in discussing?" Julian forwarded the email to his legal team with instructions to set up a meeting. This was no longer just about one incident or one airline, it was about using his platform to effect real change. At the hotel, the manager was waiting in the lobby to personally escort him to a complimentary upgraded suite. "We stand with you, Mr. Pierce," she said quietly as they walked to the elevator. In his suite, Julian finally allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The day had been a roller coaster of humiliation, anger, solidarity, and strategic planning. His merger was secure, his company would make history, and the airline that had discriminated against him was facing serious consequences. But none of that erased the fundamental injustice of what had happened. No amount of corporate apologies or stock price drops could change the fact that, for a few crucial moments that morning, he had been reduced to his skin color, seen not as Julian Pierce, CEO, but simply as a black man who could be displaced for a white passenger's convenience. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Dignity always." What had happened to him happened to countless others every day, people without his resources, platform, or power to fight back. His resolve hardened. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The San Francisco morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the corporate world. Julian had slept surprisingly well, his years of high-pressure business decisions having taught him to compartmentalize stress. He completed his usual 5-mile run, this time along the Embarcadero with views of the Bay Bridge, before returning to his hotel to prepare for what would be a pivotal day. At precisely 9 a.m., Amanda Chen arrived at his suite for their scheduled meeting. The civil rights attorney was even more impressive in formal settings, sharp, focused, and clearly prepared. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Pierce," she said, arranging documents on the coffee table between them. "I know you have your own legal team, but I specialize in discrimination cases against major corporations." Julian nodded. "My team is excellent at corporate law, but this situation requires specific expertise. That's why I wanted to hear your thoughts directly." Amanda launched into a detailed analysis that demonstrated why she was considered one of the top civil rights attorneys in the country. "The evidence is extraordinary. We have video documentation, witness statements, leaked internal communications with explicitly biased language, and now, as of this morning, statements from 3 former employees alleging a pattern of discriminatory practices." 3 former employees? Julian hadn't heard this development. They came forward overnight. One black flight attendant claims she was repeatedly denied premium routes despite seniority. A Latino baggage handler was disciplined for infractions that white employees committed without consequence. And most damning, a former HR representative alleges the airline maintained a VIP accommodation policy that prioritized certain passengers, who happened to be predominantly white, over others, regardless of ticket status. Julian processed this information. So this goes beyond my incident. Far beyond, Amanda confirmed. Your case could be the key that unlocks a pattern of systemic discrimination. That's why I'm proposing not just an individual lawsuit, but a class action. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, potential outcomes, and the broader implications. Julian's corporate legal team joined via video conference, asking pointed questions about risks and benefits. The airline's lawyers have already reached out with an improved settlement offer, Julian's chief counsel reported. $5 million, confidential arbitration, public apology. Still trying to buy silence, Julian observed. Amanda nodded. These offers will keep increasing as their stock continues to fall. But a confidential settlement won't create lasting change. By the meeting's end, Julian had made his decision. We proceed with the class action. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. As Amanda gathered her materials, she paused. Mr. Pierce, may I speak candidly? Please. Cases like this usually fail because corporations have deeper pockets and more patience. They wait out plaintiffs, drag proceedings until the public loses interest, then settle quietly. What makes this different is you, your resources, your platform, and your unwillingness to be silenced. You could force real accountability. After Amanda left, Julian called Lawrence to update him on the merger's progress and the legal strategy. Then he contacted his PR team to coordinate the press conference details. By noon, everything was arranged. The press conference would take place at 10 a.m. the following day at the prestigious Fairmont Hotel in downtown San Francisco. Major networks had already confirmed attendance. As Julian was reviewing his statement, his phone rang with a call from the airline's chief diversity officer, Dr. Elaine Jackson. Mr. Pierce, she began, her voice carefully modulated, I wanted to personally express our deepest regrets about your experience. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, Julian replied neutrally. Our CEO, Mr. Warren, would like to meet with you privately to discuss resolution. We're prepared to make this right, whatever that takes. Julian considered his response carefully. I appreciate the outreach, Dr. Jackson, but at this point, any discussions will need to include my legal team and address not just my experience, but the apparently systemic issues at your airline. There was a pause before she continued, her tone shifting slightly. Mr. Pierce, we're genuinely committed to improving. But a protracted legal battle serves no one. Surely we can find a solution that acknowledges your mistreatment while allowing us to implement meaningful changes internally. I disagree, Julian said firmly. Public accountability is essential for meaningful change. I'll see your CEO at tomorrow's press conference. The next morning, the Fairmont's Grand Ballroom was packed with journalists, cameras, and industry observers. Julian stood at the podium in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his presence commanding the room. To his right sat Amanda Chen and his legal team. To his left, surprisingly, stood Victoria Reynolds from Horizon Global, along with CEOs from 3 other major tech companies, a powerful show of solidarity. Do you believe companies should be held publicly accountable for discrimination, or are private settlements more effective? Comment number 1 if you support Julian's decision to pursue a public class action lawsuit. Comment number 2 if you think he should have accepted the private settlement and moved on. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how this high-stakes legal battle unfolds and how Julian transforms his personal humiliation into a movement for change. Good morning, Julian began, his voice steady and clear. 2 days ago, I boarded a flight as a first-class passenger with a confirmed seat assignment. I was forcibly removed to accommodate another passenger who believed my seat belonged to him by virtue of his status and routine. The airline staff supported this belief without checking facts, called security when I calmly refused to surrender my rightful place, and had me physically removed from the aircraft. He paused, letting the facts settle. But this press conference isn't about one incident or one passenger. Evidence has emerged of a pattern of discriminatory practices at this airline, practices that systematically devalue certain passengers based on race. Julian gestured to Amanda, who stepped forward. Today, we are filing a class action lawsuit against the airline for discriminatory practices that violate federal civil rights laws, she announced. We've already identified 27 plaintiffs who experienced similar treatment, and we expect that number to grow substantially. A reporter called out, "Mr. Pierce, the airline has offered substantial settlements. Why pursue this publicly?" Julian leaned into the microphone. "This isn't about money. It's about dignity. It's about every person who has ever been made to feel less worthy because of the color of their skin. No confidentiality agreement or corporate apology can address the systemic nature of this problem." Another journalist asked, "What do you hope to achieve with this lawsuit?" "Structural change," Julian replied without hesitation. "Transparent policies. Accountability. And most importantly, a precedent that makes corporations understand that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business." The questions continued for 30 minutes, with Julian and Amanda providing clear, measured responses. Throughout, Julian maintained the composure that had served him well in boardrooms around the world, even as he spoke passionately about the broader implications of his experience. As the press conference concluded, Julian made a final statement that would be replayed on news programs throughout the day: "I'm fortunate. I have the resources to fight back. But for every person like me who can stand at a podium and demand justice, there are thousands who can't. This lawsuit is for them." The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Within hours, a coalition of business leaders announced their support for Julian's action. The hashtag #StandWithJulian joined #JusticeForJulian in trending worldwide. The airline stock, already weakened, plummeted another 12%. Meanwhile, investigative journalists began digging deeper into the airline's practices. By evening, a major news outlet had uncovered that Captain Gregory, who had labeled Julian an unruly passenger, had been involved in 3 previous incidents where passengers of color were removed from flights after disputes with white passengers. Social media sleuths discovered that Brittany, the head flight attendant, had a history of problematic social media posts, including one where she complained about certain people always wanting special treatment after working a flight to Atlanta, a city with a predominantly black population. Most surprisingly, DeAndre Washington, the young black airport employee who had spoken with Julian before boarding, came forward with his own testimony. "Mr. Pierce was kind to me that morning," he told reporters. "He gave me his card, offered me an internship opportunity. 20 minutes later, I watched security escort him out like a criminal. I've seen this happen before. The airline has an unspoken policy of accommodating certain passengers over others, even when they're wrong." The airline's desperate attempts to contain the situation continued. Their CEO, Richard Warren, issued a video statement promising a complete review of policies and mandatory sensitivity training. But it was too little, too late. The damage to their reputation was severe and deepening. Wade Thornton's troubles were mounting as well. After being placed on leave by Pinnacle Investments, additional complaints from colleagues emerged alleging a pattern of discriminatory behavior. His company issued a statement distancing themselves further. "The actions of Mr. Thornton do not reflect our values. We are conducting a thorough investigation." Throughout the media storm, Julian maintained his focus on 2 priorities: finalizing the historic merger with Horizon Global and building a coalition to address discrimination in corporate America more broadly. The day after the press conference, he announced the formation of the Corporate Equality Initiative, a nonprofit organization funded with $10 million of his personal wealth. Its mission: To provide legal support to victims of corporate discrimination and advocate for transparent, equitable policies across industries. As Julian prepared for a series of media appearances to discuss the initiative, Lawrence called with news from New York. The merger documents are signed. It's official, Axiom Horizon is now the largest black-owned tech company in America. Julian allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Despite everything, he had achieved the business milestone he'd been working toward for years. But now, that achievement was coupled with a new purpose, one that might ultimately prove more significant than any corporate merger. "What's our market cap?" Julian asked. "As of market close, $3.8 billion, Lawrence replied. "And climbing." Julian nodded, thinking of his mother's words about dignity. He had refused to surrender his, and in doing so, had opened the door for others to reclaim theirs. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since being marched off that plane, Julian felt the full measure of his power, not just as a CEO, but as a catalyst for change. What would you do if you found yourself leading a movement for justice that you never asked for? Have you ever had to choose between accepting an apology and pushing for deeper change? Let me know in the comments, and let's continue with Julian's story as he faces unexpected challenges and opportunities in his fight for accountability. 3 weeks after the incident, Julian sat in his New York office overlooking Central Park, reviewing the latest developments in what the media had dubbed Seatgate. On the wall-mounted screens, financial news networks displayed the airline's continued stock decline, now down 32% from pre-incident levels, representing nearly $4 billion in lost market value. Kendall entered with his afternoon coffee. "Mr. Pierce, the airline's board just announced an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning." Julian nodded. "Not surprising. Their quarterly earnings call is next week, and analysts are predicting a bloodbath. Also, Amanda Chen called. The judge has certified the class action. They now have 78 plaintiffs." The lawsuit had grown exponentially as more people came forward with stories of discrimination. Some described being downgraded from first class despite confirmed reservations. Others told of excessive security scrutiny compared to white passengers. Flight attendants of color shared accounts of hostile work environments and passed over promotions. Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria Reynolds. "Airline CEO Warren just reached out to me directly. They're desperate to settle before the board meeting. Thought you should know." He wasn't surprised. Richard Warren had been making increasingly frantic attempts to contact him through various channels. Julian had maintained his position: any resolution would need to be public, transparent, and address systemic issues. Lawrence entered the office, tablet in hand. "You need to see this. It just leaked to the Wall Street Journal." Julian took the tablet and read the headline: "Airline Internal Memo Reveals VIP Priority List, Demographics Raise Discrimination Concerns." The article detailed an internal airline document that ranked passengers for preferential treatment during conflicts or overbookings. The criteria heavily favored long-standing customers who were predominantly white, male, and over 50, passengers like Wade Thornton. "This confirms everything," Julian said quietly. "They had a system that inherently disadvantaged minorities and women, then pretended my removal was about computer errors and misunderstandings." Lawrence nodded grimly. "The DOT investigation is ramping up too. They've requested 5 years of passenger complaint data sorted by demographic information." By evening, the story had exploded further. Former airline employees were coming forward with additional evidence of systematic discrimination. Social media was flooded with #Boycott Airways posts from passengers canceling upcoming flights and cutting up loyalty cards. At 9 p.m., Julian received a call from Amanda Chen. The airline's legal team just reached out. They want an emergency meeting tomorrow before their board convenes. They're prepared to discuss substantial policy changes and appropriate compensation for all plaintiffs. "They're feeling the pressure," Julian observed. "Absolutely. But here's what's interesting, they specifically mentioned wanting to discuss leadership changes with you. I think they're planning to clean house. Julian considered this development. Set up the meeting. I'll fly to Chicago tonight. The following morning, in a conference room at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, neutral territory, Julian faced the airline's legal team and Richard Warren himself. The CEO looked like he hadn't slept in days, his normally impeccable appearance now haggard. "Mr. Pierce," Warren began, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We want to resolve this situation in a way that acknowledges the gravity of what occurred and implements meaningful changes." Julian remained silent, waiting. Warren continued, visibly uncomfortable. "As a show of our commitment, I can announce that the entire flight crew involved in your incident has been terminated, effective immediately." "That's treating the symptom, not the disease," Julian replied evenly. "Those employees were operating within a culture that you created and maintained." Warren flinched but pressed on. "We're prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement package to all plaintiffs, revise our seating policies with input from civil rights experts, implement mandatory bias training for all staff, and create a passenger bill of rights." Amanda Chen, sitting beside Julian, spoke up. "And who would oversee these changes? The same leadership that allowed discriminatory practices to flourish?" Warren hesitated, then revealed the real purpose of the meeting. "Our board is meeting in 3 hours. They've suggested that new leadership might be appropriate. Before they make any decisions, we wanted to know what arrangement might satisfy your concerns." Julian understood the subtext immediately. Warren was trying to save his job by offering Julian whatever he wanted. "True accountability starts at the top," Julian said firmly. "Your entire executive team was aware of these practices and either actively encouraged them or willfully ignored them. Any meaningful resolution must include leadership changes." Warren's face fell. "I've dedicated 27 years to this airline. And in those 27 years, you've fostered a culture where people like me are seen as less deserving of dignity and respect," Julian replied, his voice level but intense. "That legacy can't be erased with training videos and policy tweaks." The meeting ended with no resolution, but Julian had made his position clear. 3 hours later, as he boarded his private flight back to New York, news alerts lit up his phone: airline CEO and senior executives ousted by board in wake of discrimination scandal. The board's statement was unambiguous: "After careful consideration of recent events and revelations about our company culture and practices, we have determined that new leadership is essential to rebuild trust and ensure all customers are treated with dignity and respect." The entire executive team was gone: Warren, the COO, the head of customer experience, and notably, the chief diversity officer who had tried to broker a private settlement with Julian. The airline stock briefly rallied on the news before continuing its downward trajectory as more damaging information emerged. The Department of Transportation announced a formal investigation into potential violations of civil rights laws. The Department of Justice was reportedly considering its own inquiry. Days later, Julian received a surprising email from Maxwell Johnson, the black security officer who had been present during his removal. Maxwell had resigned from his position and was requesting a meeting. They met at Julian's office the following afternoon. Maxwell, now in civilian clothes rather than a uniform, seemed both nervous and relieved. "I've wanted to apologize since it happened," he began. "I recognized you immediately, but I froze. I was afraid of losing my job if I spoke up." Julian studied the man across from him. "You were in a difficult position." "That's no excuse," Maxwell insisted. "I've replayed that morning in my mind 1,000 times, thinking about what I should have done differently. When I saw Captain Gregory's name in the news for previous incidents, I wasn't surprised. There's been a pattern for years, but nobody with power ever challenged it." "Until now," Julian said quietly. Maxwell nodded. "That's why I'm here. I've documented other incidents I witnessed, dates, names, patterns. I've already spoken with Ms. Chen for the lawsuit, but I wanted you to know, your stand that day has changed things. People are speaking up now who were afraid before. As Maxwell shared his experiences, Julian was reminded again that his individual humiliation had exposed a much larger system of injustice, one that affected countless people without his resources or platform. Meanwhile, the airline's troubles continued to mount. A class action lawsuit from shareholders alleged that executives had concealed discriminatory practices that posed material risks to the company. Major corporate clients, including Julian's Axiom Horizon, announced they would no longer use the airline for business travel, a devastating blow to their most profitable market segment. Wade Thornton, the passenger who had taken Julian's seat, was officially terminated by Pinnacle Investments after their internal investigation concluded he had violated company ethics policies. In a statement that didn't mention Julian by name, Pinnacle announced zero tolerance for behaviors that demean or discriminate against any individual. Flight attendant Brittany Marshall attempted damage control with a tearful interview on a morning show, claiming she never meant to discriminate and was just following protocol. The interview backfired when viewers pointed out that she never actually apologized and seemed more concerned about her own reputation than the harm caused. Captain Gregory remained silent, but investigative reporting revealed he had been the subject of multiple internal complaints that had been systematically buried by management. 6 weeks after the incident, the airline's board made another major announcement. They had appointed Gabrielle Winston, a highly respected black female executive from the hotel industry, as the new CEO. Her first public statement was both acknowledgement and promise. This airline lost its way by forgetting a fundamental truth: every passenger deserves equal dignity and respect. Under my leadership, we will rebuild from the ground up, with transparency, accountability, and inclusion as our guiding principles. We have a long journey ahead to regain trust, but that journey begins today. The appointment was widely praised as more than symbolic. Winston had a proven track record of transforming corporate cultures. Julian issued a carefully worded statement supporting the decision while emphasizing that structural changes, not just personnel changes, were necessary. That evening, as Julian reviewed the day's developments with his team, Lawrence raised the question they'd all been considering. The airline's offering a clean slate with new leadership. Their stock has been punished. The crew that mistreated you is gone. Is there a point where we say, mission accomplished, and move on? Julian considered the question seriously. He had never been interested in destroying the airline, only in holding it accountable and forcing meaningful change. Had that goal been achieved? Let's see what Winston proposes, he finally said. If her changes are substantive rather than cosmetic, we can discuss modifying our position. As the meeting concluded, Julian received a message from his mother. She had sent a photo of him from high school, gangly, serious, wearing an oversized suit at a debate competition. Beneath it, she'd written, "Always knew you'd change things. Just didn't know it would be the whole damn airline industry. Proud of you, baby." Julian smiled at the message, thinking about how far he'd come from that earnest teenager, and how, in some fundamental ways, he hadn't changed at all. He still believed in speaking up, in standing his ground, in the power of dignity. The airline was facing its reckoning. But the larger fight against systemic discrimination was far from over. 2 months after the incident, Julian sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse, watching rain streak across the floor-to-ceiling windows. Despite the luxury surrounding him, the custom furniture, the original artwork, the panoramic views of the city, he felt a heaviness that material success couldn't lighten. His phone lay on the coffee table, screen dark after he'd silenced yet another call from an unknown number. The calls had been coming with increasing frequency, some from media outlets still hungry for interviews, others from strangers with hateful messages. Julian's security team had intercepted 3 credible death threats in the past week alone. His social media accounts, once focused on technology innovation and business strategy, were now flooded with both passionate support and vicious racist attacks. The increased security presence at Axiom offices was just one visible sign of how his life had changed. Lawrence had insisted Julian take the weekend off. "You've been going non-stop for 8 weeks, his VP had argued. The merger integration is on track. The lawsuit is proceeding. Take 48 hours for yourself. But solitude had only made Julian more aware of the toll recent events had taken. He hadn't had a full night's sleep since the incident. His morning runs, once a source of clarity and energy, now required security personnel. Even simple pleasures like dining out had become complicated by public recognition and the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. His doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. The security system showed his mother in the private elevator, making her weekly visit from Detroit. Julian smiled despite his mood. Elaine Pierce was the one person he never had to perform for, the one who saw through his carefully maintained composure. "You look terrible," she announced as she entered, setting down her purse and immediately moving to the kitchen to prepare tea, a ritual unchanged since his childhood. "Hello to you too, Mom," Julian replied with a weary smile. "Don't mom me. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping." She put the kettle on and turned to face him, her expression softening. "The price of standing up is always higher than anyone tells you." Julian nodded, unable to argue. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No one ever asks to become a symbol," Elaine said, her voice gentle but firm. "Your great-grandfather didn't ask to be the first black man to vote in his county after Reconstruction. Your grandmother didn't ask to be the test case for integrating the department store in 1963. But when the moment finds you, you either stand or you don't." The kettle whistled, and she prepared 2 cups of tea, adding honey to Julian's the way she had since he was a child. They moved to the living room, sitting side by side on the sofa with the rain-streaked city beyond them. "I keep thinking about Maxwell," Julian said after a while. "The security officer?" Julian nodded. "He called me last night. Said he can't sleep either, keeps replaying that day, wondering if he could have prevented it." "Guilt's a heavy burden," Elaine observed. "I told him I don't blame him. He was caught in the same system, just trying to keep his job." "Do you blame him?" Elaine asked directly. Julian considered the question. "I understand why he didn't speak up. But understanding isn't the same as absolution." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and watching the rain. Finally, Elaine spoke again. "You remember what your father used to say about carrying other people's burdens?" Julian smiled faintly. "That a strong man lifts others, but knows which weights aren't his to bear. You can't carry Maxwell's guilt. Or the airline's shame. Or the weight of every injustice in this country. Your only responsibility is to do right as you see it." After his mother left, Julian found himself restless. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd been avoiding. "Mr. Pierce," Amanda Chen answered immediately. "I was going to call you tomorrow about the new settlement offer." "I'm not calling about the lawsuit," Julian clarified. "I've been thinking about the other victims, the ones who've come forward. How are they doing?" There was a pause before Amanda answered. "It varies. Some are energized by finally being heard. Others are struggling with the publicity, the backlash. A few have received threats similar to yours. Are we providing them support? Security if needed? Counseling? The legal fund covers some expenses, but it's limited," Amanda admitted. "Expand it," Julian said decisively. "Whatever they need, security, therapy, temporary relocation if necessary. Send me the cost estimates tomorrow." After ending the call, Julian felt something he hadn't in weeks, a sense of purpose beyond his own case. These people had stood up alongside him, often with far more to lose and far fewer resources to protect themselves. Around midnight, his phone rang again, a number he didn't recognize. Usually, he would let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Julian Pierce. "Mr. Pierce, it's Maxwell Johnson. I'm sorry to call so late." Julian sat up straighter. "Is everything all right?" No, Maxwell's voice was strained. I've been getting threats since I testified. Someone followed my daughter home from school today. I don't know who else to call." Without hesitation, Julian replied, "Text me your address. I'm sending security to you now, and will arrange safe transportation for your family tomorrow." After making the necessary calls to his head of security, Julian found himself too wired to sleep. He went to his home office and began drafting plans for a more comprehensive support system for witnesses and plaintiffs, not just in his case, but in similar situations nationwide. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Julian's phone rang again. This time it was Lawrence. "You need to see this," his VP said without preamble. Brittany Marshall, the flight attendant, reached out through her lawyer. "She wants to meet privately. Says she has information that could change everything about the case." Julian frowned. "What kind of information?" "She wouldn't say specifically. Only that the discrimination went deeper than we know, and she's had an awakening since being fired." "Could be a trap," Julian mused. "Or a ploy to generate sympathy. That's what I thought. But her lawyer is reputable, and she's apparently turned down paid interview offers from major networks." Julian considered the possibilities. "Set it up. Neutral location, full security, and our lawyers present." 2 days later, in a conference room at Amanda Chen's law firm, Julian found himself face to face with Brittany Marshall. Gone was the polished airline uniform and confident demeanor. She looked smaller somehow, her red hair pulled back severely, dark circles under her eyes. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Pierce," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "I know you have every reason to distrust me." Julian nodded but said nothing, waiting. "What happened on that flight?" She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. "At the time, I told myself I was just following protocol. Mr. Thornton was a known quantity, executive platinum, specific preferences. The system was designed to prioritize customers like him. At the expense of customers like you," Brittany admitted. "But that's not an excuse. I've spent weeks replaying that day, recognizing moments where I could have, should have, done things differently." Julian maintained his neutral expression. "What information do you have that warranted this meeting?" Brittany glanced at her lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thumb drive. "This contains internal training materials and communications that were never meant to become public. They show that the airline explicitly trained staff to prioritize certain customer profiles over others, regardless of ticket status or boarding passes." Amanda Chen leaned forward. "Are you saying the airline had official policies discriminating against minorities?" "Not explicitly," Brittany clarified. "They were careful with the language. It was coded, traditional customers, legacy passengers, highest value demographics. But in practice, everyone understood what it meant. Wade Thornton fit the profile perfectly, older white male, executive platinum for years, specific seat preferences, connections with board members." She looked directly at Julian. "When you didn't move immediately, I followed the escalation protocol exactly as I'd been trained. It wasn't until I saw the video, saw myself through others' eyes, that I realized what I'd been part of." Julian studied her carefully. "Why come forward now? Why not when you were first fired?" Brittany's composure cracked slightly. "Honestly? At first, I was angry. I felt scapegoated while executives who created the policies protected themselves. But then I started receiving messages, some supportive, but others." She swallowed hard. "People found my parents' address. I got death threats. I was recognized at the grocery store by someone who called me a racist to my face." "That must have been difficult," Julian acknowledged, his tone neutral. "It was nothing compared to what I'd participated in doing to others," Brittany replied, surprising him with her candor. "I've had what you might call an awakening. My entire worldview has been challenged. I was raised in a bubble where I never had to confront my own biases or privilege. She gestured to the thumb drive. This information proves the discrimination was systematic and intentional. I'm prepared to testify about how these policies were implemented. No confidentiality agreements, no conditions. After Brittany left, Julian and Amanda reviewed the materials. They were damning, detailed instructions on how to handle seating conflicts that clearly favored certain passenger profiles, training scenarios that depicted minorities as problematic when asserting their rights, and messaging from executives reinforcing these practices. This changes everything, Amanda said. With this evidence and her testimony, we can prove intent, not just negligence or implicit bias, but deliberate discrimination. Julian nodded, processing both the legal implications and his unexpected feelings about Brittany. He had expected to feel vindicated by her admission, perhaps even satisfaction at her downfall. Instead, he felt something more complex, recognition of how systems of inequality trapped people on all sides, though in vastly different ways. That evening, Julian called Maxwell, who had been relocated with his family to a secure apartment. "How are you holding up?" Julian asked. "Better," Maxwell replied. "Kids are adjusting. Wife's still anxious, but the security helps." He paused. "I heard Brittany came forward with evidence." News travels fast. Among the airline's ex-employees, it does. We've formed something of a support group. Julian considered this. You and Brittany were both caught in a corrupt system. The difference is, you recognized it was wrong even as you participated. Small comfort, Maxwell said quietly. Recognition without action is just complicity with self-awareness. The conversation stayed with Julian throughout the night. As the face of the lawsuit and the media story, he'd been cast as the hero standing against corporate racism. But the reality was more nuanced. He was a man who had the resources, platform, and privilege to fight back when millions facing similar discrimination did not. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Watching you on CNN again. Remember what matters." Julian smiled, hearing her voice in the words. What mattered wasn't the lawsuit or the media attention or even the airline's reckoning. What mattered was using this moment to create lasting change, for the flight attendants of color who'd been passed over for promotions, for people like Maxwell who felt forced to participate in systems they recognized as wrong, even for people like Brittany who were beginning to recognize their own complicity. The next morning, Julian called Lawrence with new instructions. I want to expand the Corporate Equality Initiative. Beyond legal support, I want to create a whistleblower protection program, resources for insiders who expose discriminatory practices at their companies. That's going to ruffle some corporate feathers, Lawrence cautioned. Including some of our business partners. Good, Julian replied. Comfort has never created change. As he ended the call, Julian reflected on how his life had transformed in the 2 months since that fateful flight. His merger had succeeded, making Axiom Horizon a tech powerhouse. But he'd also become something he never sought to be, a public figure in America's ongoing struggle with racial inequality, with all the burdens and responsibilities that entailed. The personal cost had been high. Privacy lost, security concerns, sleepless nights, the weight of others' expectations and projections. Yet as he looked at the expanding coalition of voices joining his cause, from corporate executives to former airline employees to everyday people sharing their own stories of discrimination, Julian recognized that his individual humiliation had sparked something larger than himself. That knowledge didn't erase the trauma of being marched off that plane like a criminal. It didn't eliminate the exhaustion of fighting battles he hadn't chosen. But it did affirm his mother's lifelong wisdom. Dignity wasn't just about standing tall in your own defense, it was about creating space for others to stand alongside you. Has something in your life ever made you confront uncomfortable truths about society? Have you witnessed someone having a moral awakening like Brittany's? Comment number 1 if you've ever had to rethink your own beliefs or behaviors after seeing their impact on others. Comment number 2 if you believe people who participate in discriminatory systems deserve a chance at redemption. Like and subscribe to see the powerful conclusion to Julian's story.